Hello and welcome to PentaLive. I'm your host, David Golub from New York City. We've got a big show for you. Today we're looking at the crisis in Ukraine, where more than 100,000 Russian troops surround the Eastern European country. The question marks around the intentions of Russia have led to an international diplomatic uproar. Just this week, we saw an unprecedented shouting match on the floor of the United Nations Security Council between the United States and Russia. The Americans accuse the Russians of preparing for war, while the Russians upbraid the Americans for stoking the flames. While the politicians argue, we'll look at the crisis from the perspective of the software supply chain, because what's also at stake here today is the ability of 700,000 developers, maybe more than that, to continue working. Software engineering has flourished in Eastern Europe since the end of the Cold War in 1989. Now, with a new kind of Cold War possibly emerging, these IT outsourcing patterns, which have been so successful for the past few decades, suddenly seem risky. Suddenly, the NATO shield may emerge as a critical calculation for tech companies looking to de-risk their talent footprint. These are complex issues, and I'm very glad to have two experts here today to help me guide me through the questions. Our first guest is retired Admiral Loïc Finaz, a French military expert and an advisor to Pentalog CEO. Loïc also served as the head of the French War School, which is equivalent perhaps to the American West Point for our viewers in the US. He'll break down the geostrategic issues. We'll also hear from Pentalog's CEO Frédéric Lasnier, who will give us his perspective on the crisis and how companies can begin to de-risk their operations. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Loïc, will begin with you as our military expert. First, let me ask you if my summary of the situation seemed accurate or if I missed anything that was important to mention.
No, it seems to be accurate, but the question is it a new war? Is it a new Cold War or a hot one? Honestly, I don't think so. Even if when the world is explosive, you can't swear by anything. The slightest spark can make it explode, of course. And you can also wonder if Putin intends to achieve his personal and long-term agenda before he leaves. He is 70 now. But nevertheless, when Putin wants to make a military move, he doesn't send a printed invitation, which seems to be the case, now for weeks. And the consequences would be very significant in many areas, military, political, economic. Just look at the consequences for Russia of its withdrawal from the SWIFT system, which is that banking fluidity system, which is a Belgian private system, or the freezing of Putin's personal assets, and not to mention the risk of stalemate. That's why, for this reason, I don't think it is, even it could be explosive, I don't think it is a new Cold War.
Thank you for that perspective. Before we switch over to Fred, I would like to just probe a little bit and ask you because you painted a picture, what do you think the intentions are of Vladimir Putin, the Russian president?
I think, and you're right, this is the main question. This is the question we have to try to understand. What does he actually want, or more, modestly from our part, what could he want? First of all, clearly, he wants a three-way system: China, Russia, USA, and not a two-way system with only China and the USA. He has well understood that not everything is played out in the Pacific. This is something too many people think, and of course, Pacific is today more important than it has ever been. But Putin knows not everything is there. The second thing he doesn't want, and it is, even if we don't like him or whatever you think about him, the second thing he doesn't want Ukraine or Georgia, for that matter, in NATO. In another words, he doesn't want Western missile just, at his border. The third thing beyond that, it is a question of status. He doesn't want to see 20 years of geopolitical efforts just ruined. And then he wants to probably ward off the looming decline of Russia, which is an economic one. Today, Russia, it is the GDP of Spain. I love Spain, but the GDP of Russia is today the GDP of Spain. And then there is also, everybody knows that, a demographic loom with an aging country, which is in poor rates. I think it is what he wants to do. What can else he could do? Most probably just to weaken Ukraine. He doesn't want to invade Ukraine. He wants just to weaken Ukraine. And probably British secret services may be right, more than the Americans who are claiming attack. He wants also to force his way to the negotiating table, and he wants to be taken seriously. At the same time, and just to finish, in the end, doesn't this also play into the hands of the Americans and NATO? The French president was saying not a long time ago that NATO was brain dead. Hey, thanks to Putin today, it seems that NATO is surviving again. And so the Russian doesn't want to be, to throw themselves into the arms of China, and unless, of course, the Western sanctions prove to be too strong. But I think when we ask honestly what he wants, these are the answers.
Well, thank you for that perspective. It's a very delicate international dance, and I think unless we're paying very close attention, it's difficult to see these factors. Fred, let's take the perspective of the technology industry leaders. Obviously, Ukraine is a very important country from an economic standpoint. The energy is what most people think about, the transit fees for gas. But those of us in the tech industry know very well that Ukraine is a powerhouse. What's keeping the leaders of tech companies up at night regarding this crisis? What are they worried about?
Yeah, I think they worry about, Loïc talked about the demographic issue of Russia, and I think there's the same demographic issue for everyone working in IT. We are all our companies are starving. They want talents, and Ukraine is indeed a beautiful provider in the middle of Eastern Europe, and this crisis, put at stake potentially up to close to 200,000, 150,000, 200,000 Ukrainian developers. That might be, maybe that might be in the dark at any moment. Just in case. I share Loïc's opinion on the fact that probably nothing will finally happen, and especially in those weeks. But it's a matter of just having something happening, and if someone would turn the war on, then probably Ukraine would be very quickly in the dark from an internet. I mean, talking of the internet, and so with Ukraine, those 200,000 developers first. In the second time, if there would be such large operation of the Russian armies in the zone, we could imagine that there would be a reaction from the international community, the US, the NATO nations, and so probably starting to send to Russia a beautiful list of economic sanctions, having embargo probably among them, and so we could also add to the 200,000 Ukrainian developers about 500,000 Russian ones. And maybe also the people, the developers of Belarus coming with them. So that would be, that would compose probably a group of close to 800,000 developers, vanishing from the screens worldwide. And probably also a side effect in the US, maybe in the UK, maybe in EU, I don't know. But in US, I'm almost sure, looking at how US is generally prompt in its reactions. So probably an impact on the people working under visa in the US. I'm thinking, of course, of the Belarus and the Russian people working under American visa. So we could be extremely quickly. We could reach extremely quickly a number of about a million people, leaving the scene. I'm not saying forever. It's not forever. Programmers are extremely adaptive. Companies working in this domain are extremely adaptive. They find solutions, but for a while it could generate major perturbations. And you will agree with me, David, that you know the excellence of those people from Eastern Europe, and you know that they are particularly involved into R&D operations.
Yes.
So if we look at the number of again talking of demography worldwide, we look at the 25 millions of people working in the domain, we could have the impression that we're talking of about 4%. I'm afraid, looking specifically at R&D, it could be more than the double. So maybe up to 10% working in R&D could vanish from the radar.
So what should leaders be doing now, looking at the situation? Of course, we hope that politicians resolve this without conflict. We hope your optimism is the correct opinion. But as a tech leader responsible for delivering and maintaining innovation, what do I do now with this new kind of threat that I didn't see before?
Well, what Loïc said is very insightful. I think that there are lots of interest indeed into that. So because we know that the Americans, they have an interest into the situation to maybe strengthen the idea of NATO, which has sometimes been put at stake, challenged by some countries, especially in the Trump area. Then, but some of the European, and especially our president, is maybe interested in that as well. He's pushing for a unified defense in Europe, and so maybe he could be also interested into that. And Germany has now a new prime minister himself interested in a more federal Europe. So maybe there are tons of interest, trying to take an advantage on this situation. So I would not consider this crisis for something, for a 2 weeks or 2 months crisis. I'm afraid it might last for much longer. And this is a game, and in that game, indeed, I would recommend definitely to CTOs, CEOs of tech companies to find the appropriate solutions and partners to address the situation. So first of all, point one, I would definitely go for solutions for my development forces. Looking at Eastern Europe, I would favor countries being under the protection of the NATO shield. Definitely, that would be my first recommendation. So for those who are not familiar with where is the NATO zone in Europe and the EU zone in Europe, etc., that would exclude. This definition would exclude indeed Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia for a while. I'm not saying forever again, but for a while. And go a bit western of those countries and favor Poland, Romania, Czech Republic, and Bulgaria, which is also in EU and in the NATO zone. And then other solutions, which are also talking especially of the people listening us from US. Definitely, everything in Latin America is really of interest today. With great solutions in Mexico, really easy to reach, with no time difference. So easy to work in agile. So working on R&D projects from those zones is really very comfortable now. So I would also favor those areas. And finally, maybe in Asia, I would look at the nations which are not too much aligned on China, on Russia, and find solutions in a country like there are several having no problem with neither China nor US, and I would definitely go for Vietnam, which is the the solution that Pentalog has chosen in the past.
Thank you, Fred. And just for American viewers, Loïc, if I can ask you to remind us quickly, how does the NATO shield work? What is the purpose of NATO briefly, if you can refresh everyone's understanding, and what happens under the mutual obligations that NATO outlines?
The main things to know is that if one of the countries of NATO is, attacked by somebody else, even if it's one of them, all the other countries of NATO are supposed to come to help this country. That's, this is the thing to know. This is the cornerstone of NATO. If only one of the countries of NATO is attacked, all the other countries of NATO will come to help it.
And just to be clear, Ukraine is currently not a member of NATO. And so
it is not, and it is one of the main problems of that crisis. It is the fact that the Russians don't want Ukraine to become a NATO nation, and even if you don't like Russians, and if you don't like Putin, this is something that we can understand. They don't want that, and that we can understand that Ukrainian people want to become, part of NATO. I do understand that, but it is very risky from the European to think that it would be a good idea to go in this way, even if, of course, every country should be free to decide whatever it wants to become. But in the momentum of, because it is more a problem of momentum than equilibrium of the Europe today, make Ukraine become a NATO country, it is easy to understand that it will make Russian people and Putin become just crazy, and I do understand that.
Yeah. So the consequences of an attack on NATO on Ukraine would not, by definition, imply a NATO response.
Not necessarily.
They'll force the European community and the Americans to define a proportionate response, but not necessarily a military response.
You are perfectly right.
And what if there were to be an invasion, which we of course hope there is not? What type of response do you think we might see?
First of all, I think we should try to keep calm and to well understand what Putin wants. Because if hostilities were to break out, he could threaten to take everything and target Kiev in order, and only in order, to ensure that he ultimately keeps Crimea, that he already has, and Donbass and the two regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, because he could be, very much willing to keep for him, which is not the case today. He has clearly said that he didn't want the attachment of Donbass to Russia. He has clearly said that. He speaks about autonomy, but let's say that effectively hostilities were to break out, probably he would move, in fact, just to keep, at the end of the day, the Russian-speaking areas, which are the Donbass and the two regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. And we have to understand that, because if we don't, and it would be the worst scenario, it would be the scenario leading the crisis to extremes, which is very dear to Clausewitz, with America and Biden obliged to add to that in order not to be definitively discredited. And it would be, a sort of transformation of the America is back in an America is back home. And because of that, there is of course a risk, but the reaction of American people, American armies, and president, and all the Western Europe will be to stay very calm. What does he really want? And we have to avoid, the rise to extreme, which would be, in the case, of hostilities, which would be the main danger.
I think what I'm hearing you say is that the risk is that a rushed reaction could force the American president into a requirement to respond in order to not look weak.
Yes, I think this is the main risk. With China, which of course would be very, very happy about that, because I think that behind the Ukrainian crisis and the problem with Russia today, there is a much major problem, which is the one of the possible wars between China and USA, which is, I think, in the long term, much, much more frightening than what happens today in Ukraine.
Well, Fred, you mentioned Asia and the diversification of the technology in Asia. So is this something you're also thinking about from a global technology standpoint?
Clearly, yes. Absolutely. I think we have to today, as long as we are in this war for talents, we are talking of war. So let's talk also of war of talents, which is more mine. All companies, they are struggling. They are struggling to find developers, and we need to consider all zones everywhere now to really, and especially after the experience we had in the pandemic. So now everyone is capable of working remotely on any kind of project. So as probably according to experts, and I'm thinking of people like Gartner. Every year during from 21 to 27, the demand of the digital growth could reach up to 25%. So the demand, I'm talking of the demand only. So it's not so difficult to understand that it will be extremely difficult, to satisfy all those upcoming new needs, and that companies are they are really pushed to explore new zones for that. So as part of that, and especially also because the world in the pandemic, and also with the intensification of agile ways of working into companies, the world has become vertical. People now love to work in the same time zones. They don't care so much about the distance; they care about the time zone. So a company having worldwide interest should probably have now people working on each zone. So in a group like Pentalog, which recently reached 1,500 people, we are obliged to propose to our customer solution and everywhere, and being able to find for them the best routes for their software provisioning, and also and to compose the best cocktails of production for their products. So having to help them not only find the solution in the time zone, but also manage the risk at the same time, because everything we are talking in this show finally is risk. And we could add to Ukraine and Taiwan crisis, we could add, of course, the pandemic, which has been a great example that we had to manage just some months ago. And everyone remembers that at the beginning of the crisis, everyone was struggling to find a fucking laptop, right? So everyone remembers that. And that means clearly that we don't have to forget that the Taiwan and the Chinese Sea, both South Chinese Sea and Chinese Sea itself, from on the east of Taiwan, is definitely the Silicon Sea. So all the silicon of the world transits through that zone, and we need clearly to think about that. And it's exactly what Intel did by relocating a new factory, a new giant factory on the US ground. So everyone now is managing all those risks, is clearly witnessing that something is moving, and that we need to completely re-envision our strategies. Software delivery is definitely something that we need to manage. To manage exactly as we manage energy, as we manage the delivery of electronic device and things like that. We have to secure our provisioning, and sometimes allocate resources to different pockets.
So as a tech CEO, I now need to think about geostrategic risks, not just for chips, for energy, but for talent itself.
Yeah, talent has become definitely. Look, I was talking of potentially in the days, maybe in the days to come, we don't know, up to 10% of the R&D workforce in the world. So that's clear. I think that's clear. That's clear enough. And also, we had in the pandemic the risk of missing electronic devices, which was for some companies at some moment more than a risk. And I was very happy that I followed the recommendation of the people of Pentalog to make stocks of devices at that time. So definitely having those hot points on the map, like Taiwan today, that would push me to define to really create stocks for companies of electronic equipment, and for better allocation of worldwide resources of programmers.
So 25, 30 years of globalism, a peaceful period of expansion and growth, where we saw new supply chains developing in Asia for hard goods, in Eastern Europe for talent. Now suddenly we have new questions. Loïc, you are telling us that you don't think this is a new Cold War, but it's not the same day as it was yesterday. What kind of world are we living in now, and what should we expect in terms of the realignment of these forces?
I think that even if we have to be very cautious with the use of the word war, but what Frédéric described as a war is quite the war of talent, the war for chips, all that. This is the first kind of war. There is a second one we haven't discussed about yet. It is, all the cybersecurity matters,
Yeah.
But I would say that if the crisis were to become, real hostilities in Ukraine, it would not be a new war, because the cyber war and the cyber threats, it has started a long time ago. Just remember, the Estonian problems in 27, and so these cyber matters are just, paramount for us today. But it is a war not only with Russia, it is a war with China, probably more than with Russia. For Europe, it's also a war with America, and it is a real war, and it has started a long time ago, and we were not, in the top team, we Europeans, so we have to fight and to work for that. But this war, it has started a long time ago, and it is a real one.
The cyber war.
Yes.
We know a lot about this. There's been a lot of reporting about Russian penetration of American government systems, utilities. A lot of us over here wonder if the water is going to get turned off, if the electricity is going to get turned off. So hopefully hopefully there's plenty of plans for this. And I think what you're saying is that before an armed conflict might break out, or conjoined with an armed conflict, we'll see a new escalation in these types of cyber activities.
Yes,
new kinds of threats, new kinds of civilian-based activities.
It is more than possible, and we do have to think about that.
Yeah. It's war from home.
Yes.
We recently invented work from home, but this is war from home.
It's war from everywhere.
From everywhere, yeah.
So we're in a new phase that we weren't in before, and it's happening right in our living rooms,
yes.
Which is where you are right now, joining us on PentaLive. And I'm very happy to say we have our first question. Anastasia, I think maybe she joined a little bit late, but she's asking if we can expect to see any kind of reduction or move away from Ukrainian developers because of this crisis. And I think you've touched on this, Fred, and I think she's asking the question quite directly.
So yes, definitely, and there are tons of companies from Western Europe and probably from US as well, which have already started to invite Ukrainian developers to join, which is maybe a bit aggressive, and for Ukraine at this moment, which is a country really suffering the situation already. But indeed, we see that happening. We have we recently got some questions from developers of Ukraine to join Pentalog in Romania, in other countries of Pentalog. And we already know that we are going to welcome some of them. So point one, point two, we have a second type of question. So which is coming, which is a bit different, but we have customers. For now, it's more prospects coming from US, coming from UK, from Germany. Asking us some teams in Eastern Europe, in other zones than Ukraine, to cover their risk. And we have several at this moment. And I know one case. One very hot case from US, and it's going extremely fast. We started the conversation less than 10 days ago, and it's already going in ultimate phases of negotiation. So it's both. I think it's both. There, on the one side, there are companies looking to patch their risk. That considering having a risk on Ukraine, they want to have other solutions. And together with that, there is also a move, and there is a giant move already from Eastern Europe developers, and especially from Ukraine. And you're in US, David, so the numbers of people coming from Russia and Ukraine and working to look for good jobs in the US. So that trend will simply probably decuple in the coming weeks. And if we already have questions to join other Eastern Europe countries, but protected by the EU and the NATO shield, it clearly means that this move has probably started.
And Loïc, you mentioned that you don't think that Putin's intentions are an armed conflict, but a destabilization campaign. Could this, in fact, be part of his strategy to destabilize the economic engine of Ukraine in terms of development, software development? Could this be intentional?
I think it's for you, Loïc.
I am not, I don't know this problem well enough, and I don't know Ukraine well enough to answer to your question. But I am sure that destabilization is part of his aim, and it can also have an effect on another thing, which is the gas problem and the gas market. By doing that, I think he wants to change that. Just maybe getting an interesting inflation of the gas prices, all the problem around Nord Stream 2, all that stuff. Look, I don't think he wants to directly destabilize Ukraine, but by destabilizing Ukraine, he wants to get some effects on several fields, the gas one being, I think, one of the main of them.
Yeah, here I might have a little different opinion on one thing. I know Ukraine. I know Ukraine quite well. I know Russia as well. I know several countries of Eastern Europe. It's now more than 20 years that I go every 2 months to in Eastern Europe, and I think that. Maybe not economically speaking, because Ukraine compared to Russia is not a very big thing. So maybe it's not directly from an economic perspective that there is an interest for Russia to destabilize Ukraine. It's probably more from a political one. I think, and this is what tons of people say in the area. Putin is probably afraid of having millions of Russians witnessing Ukraine changing.
Mm-hmm.
Is extremely concerned by the fact that Ukraine could go much faster than Russia into something it doesn't control, which is democracy, which is new economic organizations and things like that. So Russia is a very old country, and a country which has chosen to stay a bit apart from the rest of Europe for many reasons, different reasons. Playing, for instance, it's the most specialized economy of Europe on energy. So just that, and Ukraine, on the other hand, has chosen to another way. And probably Putin is extremely concerned by that. So, sparkling, bootstrapping different fires into different zones into the Russian communities of Ukraine might be extremely interesting to slow down Ukraine progresses towards Western organization of the economy and of the political system. So I think there is something like that.
It's a point I haven't got, but it's a very good one, and I have nothing to add, but I do agree.
So your argument, which is a persuasive one, is that the most frightening thing in Ukraine for Putin is freedom, democracy, progress.
I don't know if it is the most, but clearly Fred is right. It is something which probably frighten him. Yes,
because he doesn't want to have to import that back home.
Yeah, think of the number of Ukraino-Russian families existing in the area.
Yeah. It's a very difficult situation, and obviously it's evolving minute by minute, day by day. Loïc, what signs should we be looking for now as this plays out in terms of the big players? Who's going to be talking to whom, and how will the negotiating table be set?
I would like the Normandy group to be useful for that, because I think the talks between Russia, Ukraine, of course, and France and Germany could be useful, and I am very much willing to see such a world emerging where Russia, Germany, and France really speak together. Of course, America is paramount, but I would like to see Europe in general, but specifically thanks to the Normandy group, Germany and France able to help to solve this crisis.
American perspective, what that means is a European group of countries attempting to resolve a European problem.
Yes. Is it something that America wants? I don't know, but it is something that I would like to see.
Speaking of want, and since I'm speaking to two Frenchmen, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, has been instrumental in motivating this Normandy group. He's been speaking with the Russian president. I think there's reports that he may visit Moscow. What's his interest here? What role is he trying to play, and what does he hope to gain from this?
Oh, first, there are two things. First of all, of course, he's playing a role for the French campaign. we can't just think it is not the case, and it is, and just good game. But also, I think he really wants, because he really thinks and really believes. Emmanuel Macron really believes in Europe that it is just too stupid to be so close to Russia, geographically speaking, and not able just to exchange cleverly with them. So I really think, and once again, I don't want to say that Putin is a good guy. I don't think he is, but since the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, we haven't managed very well our relationship with Russia. And so whenever Emmanuel Macron wants to help to make this relationship better, I just do fully agree with him.
And it doesn't hurt that there's elections coming up in a few weeks.
Of course, there is, but it's a game. It's a game.
Well, it's a game for us here in the United States as well. We have big question marks about what the American intentions will be. Big question marks about the degree to which we have the willpower to confront this crisis. We do see reports of American troops being on a notice to be redeployed to Eastern Europe. We're very aware of our obligations under the NATO treaty, but it is a new world. It's a new world that we're navigating, and it's a new world for companies to navigate. I think let's maybe come to the point of conclusion by really talking, Fred, practically speaking, what can companies do? What can your peers be doing today with their people, with their organizations to get them ready for this new kind of world that you and Loïc have told us we're evolving into?
Yeah, situations are. It looks like the situation is moving a bit faster than before. We are still in the COVID crisis, and we now see a new crisis upcoming in Eastern Europe, and everyone knows that there is also this pending thing in the Chinese Sea. So I would consider all of that, because the world is complex by definition. So rather than just answering the question of Ukraine today, I would try to take as much as possible all the question together and try to find my way, to find my strategy as something more global, and addressing all those different questions and looking for what is protected from the bad intentions of each one into that, and find the places in the world where I could decently find a good condition, both from demographic perspective. So what does it mean? It means finding the good engineering resources that I look for, and Eastern Europe is still a grid zone for that, but now for a while more into the western part of Eastern Europe. So which means on the west of starting on the west of Ukraine, actually. This is what it means, because the border of NATO is in a way Ukraine. So we can say that. So everything on the west of Ukraine, this is where I would move my outsourcing forces at this moment. Also for if I need to have resources in Asia for different reasons, there are tons of good reasons to need resources in Asia. I would go for countries like Vietnam, probably like Indonesia, like maybe Philippines. So there are different zones which are not so much at stake in Southeastern Asia. That I could consider good at this moment. Still looking at the demographic side, and definitely this is why in Pentalog we chose Vietnam in the area, and still thinking of Latin America for the US for the US customers and the US companies as well. Definitely, I think that would be, but not going into just a reaction to the Ukraine crisis, because again, we cannot take measures this week for next week. Something else will happen. And probably I would be very surprised, as Loïc said at the beginning of the show, I would be very surprised to see now Putin attacking this week. It would be exactly as if he would have sent first an invite. And that makes no sense. So probably, time will fly. Time will fly before anything happens, or not, or finally doesn't happen. So hard to say, but I would take my decision for a world where there will be a conversation between China and US minimum, with a potential Vladimir Putin trying to play the referee or playing a role, wanting to play a role in this relation. So Putin wants the Cold War to come back, but he has now probably understood that it will be a tripolar and not a bipolar, way of conducting the Cold War.
A tripolar world. So Loïc, we'll give you the last word. Is that where we're headed, to a three-pole world?
I don't think so, because I am not sure that Russia will be part of that on the long term. And honestly,
but doing his best to be.
Yes, I fully agree with that. But honestly, I think that our world of today is much more, is more dangerous than the world of 1914. But I don't think this crisis, this Ukraine crisis, will explode in a war. And on the long term, for me, the real danger, it's not Russia, it's China.
So the crisis in Ukraine is a warm-up. It's a reminder that we're in an increasingly complicated world with new kinds of risks. Tech companies are suddenly on the front lines of something they didn't think about for 30 years. We're very happy to have Loïc Finaz join us and to advise us on these risks as we manage this as a technology company. I thank you both for joining us this morning of American breakfast time. For those of you on your way to work, for those of you finishing your coffee, thanks for joining us, and see you next time.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Bye-bye.